What makes a truly great eMTB? Power, range, geometry, looks? It's a question I get asked a million times, and let's face it, there are many breeds on the market in terms of travel or motor type. What we're going to do today is take one mid-travel eMTB and examine what's important and why that's so. There are a ton of bright ideas out in the eMTB world, but it is critical to get the basics right. So I'm going to be taking a detailed look at such things as the shape and the purpose of the bike, the feeling, the suspension, the motor, obviously, the battery, the reliability, the componentry, and of course, my old favourite, geometry. So can I introduce you then to the Trek Rail? Now, I've ridden this bike in many parts of the world. In fact, I've ridden hundreds, well, probably thousands of other MTBs for a very long time. And with that in mind, I'm keen that you guys get to know the stuff that really matters. I also want to point out that Trek have actually supplied this bike for this video. Okay, let's get things rolling then. And what really matters, beginning with the shape and the purpose of this mid-travel bike. At 150mm travel rear and 160mm up front, this is very much a trail bike, a bike for exploring on and for generally tearing about. As an all-rounder, it therefore needs the component parts to allow you to do this effectively. But you really have to consider the bike's purpose, and does the shape of it match the demands on it? Of course, there are many breeds of eMTB in the world, downhill, cross-country, enduro, but we believe that a general purpose trail eMTB to be around 150, 160mm travel. Not too much, not too little. Oh, and of course, there's the whole question of high versus low power. Now, I want to share a little bit of insight with you guys because I think we will increasingly see a lot more lower power eMTB bikes on the market this year. And I can imagine it must be a nightmare for you guys to deal with the marketing that goes with the two different types of e-mountain bike. But what I will say is that when it comes to monster rides and big technical terrain, wow, just wow, a bike like this will not be beaten. And two of the most important things are that motor, the Bosch motor there, delivering 85 Newton meters of torque, and also the way it delivers that power, and of course, the 750 watt-hour battery in that down tube. But battery capacity is a big topic. It very much depends on the rider's intended use of a bike, and their weight too. The bottom line is the more watt-hours you have in the tank, the more range. But remember, a 50-kilo rider could potentially do double the range of a 100-kilo rider. Some people will be able to ride up to 80 miles in eco on this bike. It has 29-inch wheels, although you can swap the rear to a 27.5 for bum clearance. With huge torque at 85 Newton meters and range, the capability here is simply immense. You can really ride aggressively on this bike and get into very difficult terrain. But the key part is that the travel will enable you to get back out of there too. Now, wheel size is pretty much of the moment, and we believe that any variation on 29 or 27.5 front or rear is a great option. Or indeed 29 as on this rail. And whilst torque is important, most high-power mid-drive eMTBs today sport roughly the same amount. It is a pretty rugged bike for sure, and it's also reliable, as I found over the past few months. Such things as the oversized head tube, the clean cable routing, and the shape of purpose is actually aided by the suspension and the geometry, which I'll talk about a little bit later. How a bike feels really is paramount. What affects it? What is important? Well, a mid-travel eMTB needs to have good geometry, suspension design and shock tune, but also the way the motor delivers the power through the cranks. Now, mid-travel bike needs to be good up, down, along and across. And so the feeling of the bike is critical to your levels of comfort and fatigue. In order to answer that question of feeling though, it is key to understand the importance of stiffness and flex of the frame, and that probably every brand worldwide has strengths and weaknesses in this department. Some brands have hugely experienced engineers, others not so much. Now, having ridden track bikes for some time, I think they certainly are one of the better ones. And in a gentleman called Jim Colgrove, a pioneer of carbon and bicycle manufacture. So I think then slowly we're building up a picture here of some very key things which apply not just to the track rail, but to any eMTB. Such things as the designers need to make the bike not too stiff, not too flexy, and the suspension engineers to make the bike supportive, supple, and also lively. And many have failed to do that on eMTBs, but on this bike, job done. It seems we are rapidly getting to a better place with eMTBs in terms of geometry and feeling. You can certainly move this rail around very easily. The increased wheelbase on the rail now has a twofold effect: more stability and balance on climbs and descending poise. The steeper seat-tube angle gets the weight into the right place, increased reach, allowing you to shift body position without unbalancing the bike. Hey, now then, I'm not kayaking, I'm getting super excited to talk about geometry. Right, let's clean up on some geometry related things, starting off with the head tube angle. Now, a slacker head tube angle is going to give you more stability, especially on the steeper terrain. At the same time, a steeper seat tube angle is going to give you a more balanced and central position whilst climbing. Now, moving down to the bottom bracket height, a lower bottom bracket, now I kind of like around about 340, 345 on my bikes, is going to make the bike dynamite around corners, whereas a lower seat tube angle is going to give you more space for, well, you know what, but more of that later. I just think in a minute, it's crazy to think just how far this bike alone has come in only 6 years. We were talking 500 watt-hour batteries, really long 475mm chainstays, slack seat-tube angles, and pretty steep head-tube angles on this bike. I truly think that the designers now have a better understanding of just how much of an all-rounder this track rail really is. Suspension, it can be a complex business. Well, allegedly. No, listen, having your suspension open or closed will affect the bike's climbing ability and accuracy. But you pay more money, you get more dials. But these are marginal gains. That doesn't mean to say that lesser priced forks and shocks do not give you a great performance. What is key is that suspension design and shock tune are very closely related. Now here is an example of a RockShox Super Deluxe Ultimate Trek Through Shaft Damper. Yes, I know it's a lot of words. However, Trek have an R&D suspension facility in LA where they constantly work on the parity of suspension design and damper tune. Now, talking of more money, more dials, this bike, being a high-end bike, allows you to have two settings. You have an open setting, which you can use when you need full travel, and another setting, which means it lets the bike sit higher in its travel for such things as climbing to avoid pedal strikes. A really good resource from some brands is suspension setup guides. Trek, for example, provide riders with a suspension setup calculator. So to be honest, Airwiz technology, I can take it or leave it, although many of my colleagues actually love it to bits. I think, though, a shock pump isn't such a difficult item to use. Now, the components are critical to any eMTB, not just a trail bike. However, for a bike which, let's face it, is going to be doing a lot of different things, then certainly 200mm brake rotors front and rear, a tough and durable tyre and wheel combination, maybe a comfy seat, and also maybe such things as a oversized seat post as we have on this Trek rail here. And finally, a durable gear set might actually be better for ease of use and performance than an electronic one. Remember, you can always upgrade parts as they wear out, like the drivetrain, so it's definitely wise to prioritise investing in non-wearable parts, such as suspension dampers or wheel set, to get the best you can out of the box. Reliability, a very important factor with eMTBs. Well, you've got that bulletproof Bosch Performance CX motor there. It's water resistant, and of course, you've got a wheel replacement package from Trek should you break one. And not only is reliability important, but also is support. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got the suspension setup calculator from Trek. We've got software system updates with the Bosch Smart System on this bike, and also the whole worldwide Bosch support network. Actually, of course, we've not yet talked about the motor. Okay, the motor, the heart of every eMTB. What do you guys need to know about it? Well, to be honest with you, the main brands such as Bosch, Brose, Shimano and Yamaha are not a million miles apart when it comes down to the shape and size and also the performance. It's true, there are differences in terms of the reliability and also the app availability, but the key thing is that you, the rider, needs to understand how each motor works in order to be able to get the most out of it. And then of course there's the fine details such as the controller. Now this comes on hundreds of other Bosch equipped bikes. Is it a deal breaker? I don't think so, but guys, let's know your thoughts. I think the bigger question is the display. Now, do you watch and look at a display whilst you're riding an eMTB? I don't, but you know, like I said, another question for you guys to think about. I have spent a lot of time in some truly horrible places on this Bosch motor, but that's an important point because the motor software is something you need to take into account too. Each motor has a certain feeling and mood which you need to familiarize yourself with. For example, the extended boost on this motor means you will always get support even if your cranks are in the wrong position. You can also restart easily on climbs too. eMTB mode on the Bosch, or indeed any automatic mode, could actually be all you ever need, as it automatically adjusts the assist level. You know, another important question which you guys might need to ask yourself is how efficient is your e-bike at using watt hours? And maybe does it have any presets for, you know, more power, less range, or less power, more range? And also you've got apps. Now here's an example of this bike. We've got the Bosch e-bike Flow. The bike is instantly connected to the bike, and I can go into here to customize my riding modes. Now, personally, I actually don't do that because I think an e-bike as it is out of the box is pretty good. But here we go. We can go into turbo and we can change just things as the support level of the bike or the acceleration. As you can see here, we can go plus or minus, and that changes the behavior of the bike. So is that a kind of thing you might use? That's a question you need to ask yourself. The other great thing about apps is that you can plan routes and get an in-depth analysis of your ride when you get home. Many brands offer this, so do you need these features is the question to ask. Okay folks, it's the bit you've all been waiting for. It's the geometry section. Yes, right, now have a look at these numbers here on screen. Now for some of you, they won't make absolutely any sense whatsoever, but these numbers, I guarantee you, are fantastic numbers for a general purpose trail eMTB, regardless of whether it's a Trek or not. However, I want to counter that by saying those numbers mean nothing if they're not matched with great suspension design, great shock tune, stiffness and flex, and componentry, because an e-mountain bike is a system, not just a collection of parts. Now, what I will say is there's a very subtle balance going on here, and it does have an impact for sure. Now, one thing I want to point out is that on this bike, the higher end bikes have different geometry to the lower end bike. So if you're going for the lower end bike, all you might need to do is simply size up and it'll give you a similar geometry. You just need to shift the seat forward to give you a steeper seat tube angle and maybe go for a short stem. Okay folks, I think I've covered everything, but yeah, any questions you have about mid-travel trail eMTBs, please let us know in the comments down below, or indeed get involved in the discussion about this topic. Oh, there is one other thing, the prices. Now, the prices of eMTBs has risen in the past 5 or 6 years, but what I will say is that most brands do offer lower price point bikes, which often actually have the same motor. For example, the Trek Rail 5, which I think is around about £4,500, has exactly the same motor as this bike at 12,500. And do you know what? It'll probably climb at around about the same speed. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to EMBN for lots of other types of e-mountain bike content. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. And that's it. I'll leave you to look at this lovely eMTB.